Picture this. It's not yet 6 in the morning. March 16, 1988. A gated community in the San Gabriel foothills east of Los Angeles. A place people specifically chose because they felt safe there. A woman sits in an idling van in the driveway, waiting for her husband. He comes out through the garage, locks up behind him. Two men step out of the shadows. They have bicycles, and they have guns. What happens next is one of the most brutal, most calculated, and most infuriating unsolved contract killings in American sporting history. The man who ordered it would walk free for nearly 2 decades. He told people he was too smart to get caught. And for 19 years, he was right. This is motorsport heritage, and I spend way too much time thinking about the intersection of racing history and the darker corners of the sport nobody wants to talk about. If you're someone who loves deep-dive true crime stories wrapped inside motorsport legends, cases where justice took forever but finally arrived, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Now, you might be thinking, I came here for racing, not a crime documentary. Here's the thing. This is both. Because the man who was murdered in that driveway was Mickey Thompson. And if you know that name, you already know what was lost that morning. If you don't know that name yet, you will by the end of this, and you're going to be angry too. First American to break 400 miles per hour on land. 585 national and international speed record. The man who invented the slingshot dragster. The man who literally created stadium off-road racing out of nothing. Gone. 61 years old. Shot execution style in his own driveway alongside his wife Trudy, who was 41. And the man who ordered it did so because he lost a lawsuit and couldn't handle it. Let's go back to where this really begins, because you cannot understand the murder without understanding the business relationship that preceded it. Mickey Thompson, by the late 1970s, was already a legend. The racing career, the land speed records, the tire company bearing his name, all of that was behind him, and still he wasn't slowing down. He'd spent years racing off-road in Baja, the brutal desert runs, the Baja 1000, the whole culture of it. And he loved every second. But Mickey Thompson was always thinking about the next problem to solve. And the problem with desert racing was simple. Nobody could watch. You're putting on the greatest show in the world and your audience is sand and rattlesnake. So Mickey Thompson did what Mickey Thompson always did. He invented a solution. In 1979, he staged the first ever stadium off-road race at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. They trucked in 25 million pounds of dirt, built jumps, built obstacles, put trucks and buggies in front of paying crowds, and people lost their minds over it. By the mid-1980s, Mickey Thompson Entertainment Group, MTEG, was selling out stadiums across the country. 85,000 people at Anaheim Stadium. Average attendance north of 40,000 per event. Mickey Thompson had created an entirely new category of motorsport that simply had not existed before him. Enter Michael Goodwin. Here's what most people don't realize about Goodwin. He wasn't some small-time operator. He was the man behind Supercross, stadium motocross racing, which he launched at the Los Angeles Coliseum in 1972. By the early 1980s, Supercross was averaging 57,000 fans per event. That made it the third highest attended motorsport in America, behind only NASCAR and IndyCar. This was a real operator with real power. And on paper, a partnership with Mickey Thompson made obvious sense. Two stadium racing pioneers, combined forces, bigger events, better promotion, shared infrastructure. Logical. April 1, 1984. Thompson and Goodwin signed a partnership agreement. Goodwin got 70% ownership and was responsible for operating expenses. Thompson got 30%. They'd run an 18-month engagement before fully merging. It lasted less than 7 months, because almost immediately money started disappearing. The first joint events, at the Huserdome in Indianapolis and the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan, lost money. Not unusual for new ventures, But then Goodwin came to Thompson asking for $60,000 to cover the Indiana bills. Mickey paid it. Then Goodwin came back for another $17,000 from Michigan. Mickey paid that too because he wanted to make sure his staff got their paycheck. Goodwin, according to testimony, wasn't covering his share of anything. By October 1984, Mickey Thompson had seen enough. He went to court. A judge dissolved the partnership and returned control of MTEG to Thompson. But the money Goodwin had taken didn't come back with the paperwork. May 1986, the California Supreme Court ruled that Michael Goodwin had stolen more than $500,000 from the partnership. The judgment with interest and fees came to somewhere between $750,000 and $793,000. Goodwin's response to the Los Angeles Times was almost psychopathic in its honesty. He admitted the judge had decided he'd screwed Mickey real bad and he'd have to pay for it. But he also said, in a newspaper interview, that all he cared about was results, and if somebody had a contract with him and didn't perform, he'd take their legs off to get them to perform. Take their legs off. That phrase in a published interview. Remember that. So Goodwin owes Thompson close to $800,000 and the courts have told him to pay it. What does he do? He doesn't pay. He hides. September 1986. His company SMC changes its name to Entertainment Specialties Incorporated and immediately declares bankruptcy. November 1986. Goodwin himself files personal bankruptcy. December 1986. The company's assets get sold to a new entity called SuperX Incorporated. And who are the principals of SuperX? Goodwin's wife, Diane, and a business associate. And then, here's the part that should make your jaw drop. SuperX hires Michael Goodwin to run the whole operation at $240,000 a year. Let that sink in. He declares bankruptcy to avoid paying a judgment. His wife buys the asset, and he gets hired back to run everything he supposedly just lost, at $250,000 a year salary. The bankruptcy court eventually started untangling what he was doing, but it took time. And while the lawyers fought, Goodwin was getting angrier by the month. Then 1987 came and made it all worse. Anaheim Stadium put its exclusive racing contract up for bid. Both Thompson and Goodwin wanted it. Thompson won. Goodwin publicly stated that his Supercross series couldn't survive without that Anaheim contract. That's how critical it was. And Mickey Thompson had just taken it from him. If the financial judgment was a slow burn, the Anaheim contract loss was gasoline on the fire. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and by interesting I mean genuinely dark. This is where the threats start piling up. Over the course of the investigation and eventual trial, 15 separate witnesses testified to things they personally heard Michael Goodwin say. Not rumors. Not second-hand accounts. 15 people who heard him directly. He said he was going to kill Mickey Thompson. He said he'd have him wasted. He said Mickey wouldn't see a dime of that judgment because he'd be dead before any of it got paid. He told multiple people, multiple times, that he was too smart to get caught. One conversation in particular defined the prosecution's entire case. Bill Wilson, a retired police officer who managed one of the stadiums, testified that Goodwin told him directly he was going to take Mickey out. Wilson told him plainly, "Nobody wins in that scenario. Mickey's dead and you're in prison." Goodwin's response? They'd never catch him because he was too smart for that. He said that to a retired cop. Meanwhile, the legal situation was closing in from every direction. January 22, 1988. Diane Goodwin puts down a $40,000 deposit on a $400,000 yacht. They are planning to buy a boat while Michael is supposedly broke and hiding behind bankruptcy proceedings. January 29, 1988. The California Supreme Court affirms the judgment against Goodwin. This is the end of the legal road. No more appeals. He owes Mickey Thompson approximately $768,000 and there is no legal escape left. February 9, 1988. A restraining order prevents Goodwin from liquidating asset. The courts have caught on to his games, and are trying to freeze everything in place. So now you have a man who has been hiding money, who has been threatening to kill Mickey Thompson for 2 years within earshot of 15 different people, who has just lost his final appeal, and who is about to have his hidden assets seized. 35 days later, Mickey and Trudy Thompson are dead. Mickey knew something was coming. 3 days before the murders, he told his sister Colleen that he was afraid Goodwin would hurt Trudy. A neighbor testified that Thompson had been receiving death threats since December 1987 from someone in the motocross and off-road racing industry. Mickey's son Danny said his father told him Goodwin was out of control. Mickey Thompson had survived crashes at the Carrera Panamericana in the 1950s. He'd run 406 miles per hour across Bonneville Salt and walked away. He'd been in wrecks that should have killed him. And now at 59 years old, he was scared. Not of racing. Of Michael Goodwin. March 16, 1988. Bradbury, California. Bradbury is a gated community in the San Gabriel foothills about 20 miles east of downtown Los Angeles. It's the kind of place people choose specifically because they want security, privacy. That morning Mickey and Trudy were getting ready to leave for the MTG offices at Anaheim Stadium. Just before 6 in the morning. Still dark. Trudy was sitting in the idling van in the driveway waiting. Mickey came out through the garage. A gunman stepped from the shadows and shot Mickey in the torso. He went down in his own driveway. According to the neighbor who witnessed what followed, Mickey called out not to hurt his wife. Shot, bleeding, on the ground, his first thought was Trudy. A second gunman opened fire through the windshield of the van. Trudy screamed for them not to shoot. The killers dragged her from the vehicle. And then they did something that tells you exactly what this was. They made Mickey watch his wife die before they killed him. Both victims were shot in the head at close range. Execution style. Then the two gunmen got on 10-speed bicycles and pedaled away through the community gate. Just rode off into the early morning dark. Here's the thing that removes any doubt about motive. Trudy Thompson was wearing $70,000 worth of jewelry. The killers didn't take it. Between the two victims, there was roughly $4,000 in cash within reach. The killers didn't take that either. This is where the robbery theory collapses completely. They killed 2 people and left behind more than most Americans earn in month. What they did leave at the scene was a stun gun that didn't belong to the Thompsons, 9mm shell casings, muddy shoe prints, and an orange rind. Someone had been waiting there long enough to peel and eat an orange in the darkness. This was planned, patient, professional. 4 hours later, investigators found a gray 10-speed bicycle abandoned down the hill. The shooter description: 2 black men in their 20s to early 30s, approximately 6 feet tall, muscular build, dark jogging suits or hooded sweatshirts, never changed because those 2 men were never found. The same day as the murders, detectives contacted Michael Goodwin. Of course they did. When your prime suspect has been telling people for 2 years in front of witnesses that he's going to kill the victim, you call that person first. Goodwin agreed to meet with detectives, but only at his attorney's office. And when he got there, he refused to answer a single question. The man who everyone knew was responsible, sitting right there, and said nothing. Here's what most people don't realize about what followed the murders. While the investigation was just getting started, Michael Goodwin wasn't sitting still waiting to see what happened. In the months after Mickey and Trudy were executed in their driveway, Goodwin and his wife bought $275,000 in gold coins, cash purchases that were hard to trace. They wired $400,000 to offshore accounts. They completed the purchase of that $400,000 yacht, the one Diane had put the deposit down on 7 weeks before the murders. And in August 1988, 5 months after the killings, Michael and Diane Goodwin sailed out of the country. They did not come back for over 2 years. Just left. Sailed away on a luxury yacht while a double murder investigation sat open with their names all over it. Detective Michael Griggs caught the case and worked it hard. He knew Goodwin was involved. Everyone in law enforcement involved in this knew Goodwin was involved. But knowing and proving are two completely different things. The problem was evidence, specifically the absence of it connecting Goodwin to anything physical. He wasn't in that driveway. He'd paid other people to be there. The actual shooters were ghosts. Nobody could identify them. Nobody came forward with information. There was no money trail investigators could follow. No checks, no wire transfers, nothing to trace between Goodwin and the killers. And here's the brutal reality of circumstantial cases. Motive alone is not enough. Threats alone are not enough. You need to build a wall brick by brick, and in 1988 they were missing too many bricks. Griggs worked the case for 4 years and retired in 1992 without an arrest. The case went cold. Think about what Michael Goodwin was doing during all this. Back in the United States after his yacht voyage, running his business, living his life. The Thompson murders officially unsolved. And then the thing that eventually unraveled everything. He got greedy again. July 1993, Goodwin was arrested for bank fraud. Nothing to do with Mickey Thompson. The FBI caught him running a scheme involving false financial statements. October 1995, both he and Diane were convicted on 12 counts of bank fraud. August 1996, he was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison and a $300,000 fine. The man who ordered a double murder went to prison, but for completely different crimes. He served less than 3 years. Paroled July 1998, 10 years after Mickey and Trudy were shot to death in their driveway. The murder case still cold. But Mickey's sister Colleen Campbell had not stopped for a single day. She talked to detectives constantly. She talked to reporters. She talked to anyone who would listen. When Goodwin walked out of federal prison in 1998, Colleen posted a $1 million reward for information leading to a conviction. $1 million of her own money. That's the measure of how badly she needed this resolve. A detective named Lilienfeld tried to bring charges to Los Angeles County prosecutors around this time, presenting what he believed was a solid enough case. The prosecutors declined. Said there wasn't sufficient evidence. Try to imagine being Colleen Campbell at that moment. Your brother and sister-in-law are dead. You know who arranged it. Law enforcement knows who arranged it. The man just served prison time for fraud and walked free. And now prosecutors are telling you they can't prove the murder. She kept going anyway. 2001 changed the trajectory of everything. America's Most Wanted rebroadcast the Thompson case. John Walsh putting it in front of millions of viewers, showing photos, asking for tip. And for the first time in 13 years, new witnesses started calling in. Here's what had happened to those witnesses in the intervening years. A lot of people had heard Michael Goodwin make threats in the mid-1980s. They'd been scared, or they didn't want to get involved, or they told themselves it wasn't their problem. 13 years later, some of those people had been carrying it. They'd watched Goodwin escape justice. They'd seen him go to federal prison for fraud and walk out. Something about seeing that episode made them pick up the phone. People who'd witnessed conversations they'd never reported. People who'd stayed quiet in 1988 but couldn't anymore. August 12, 2001. Detectives arrested Michael Goodwin and placed him in a lineup. Witnesses identified him. The evidence went to a grand jury in Orange County. The grand jury declined to indict. Goodwin walked out again. 4 months later, December 13, 2001, Orange County filed charges and arrested Goodwin for the murders of Mickey and Trudy Thompson. 13 years, 8 months, and 27 days after they died. But then Goodwin's lawyers found a genuine legal problem. Jurisdiction. The murders happened in Bradbury, which is in Los Angeles County, not Orange County. April 2004, the Orange County case was dismissed on jurisdictional grounds. Goodwin walked free yet again. Los Angeles County was ready this time. June 8, 2004, Los Angeles County filed murder charges against Michael Goodwin. The wheel kept turning. October 6, 2006, a judge reviewed the evidence and ordered Goodwin to stand trial. November 7, 2006, 18 years, 7 months, and 22 days after Mickey and Trudy Thompson were killed in that driveway, the trial began. Pasadena Superior Court. Judge Terry Schwartz presiding. Michael Goodwin was 61 years old. He'd spent nearly 2 decades living freely, paying no consequence for what he'd arranged, while a small number of determined people refused to let the case disappear. This is where it gets really interesting, because the prosecution's case was entirely circumstantial. They never found the 2 shooters. Those men remain unidentified to this day. They never found the murder weapons. They never found payment records connecting Goodwin to the killers. No witness ever saw them meet or plan together. What the prosecution had was everything surrounding those missing pieces, assembled so completely that the gaps didn't matter anymore. The prosecution built their case in layers, and understanding those layers is the key to understanding how they finally got a conviction after nearly 2 decades of failure. The first layer was the financial motive, and it was airtight. Financial records showing Goodwin had stolen more than $500,000 from the partnership. Court documents confirming the judgment against him. The paper trail of his bankruptcy fraud attempts to hide asset. The California Supreme Court ruling that had arrived just 35 days before the murders, closing every legal escape route he had. The prosecution showed the jury a man financially cornered, legally out of options, and furious about it. The second layer was the behavior surrounding the murders. The yacht deposit in January, 7 weeks before the killings, a man supposedly too broke to pay a civil judgment putting $40,000 down on a $400,000 boat. The gold coin purchases in the months after the murders, cash transactions that were deliberately hard to trace. The offshore wire transfers. The 2-year sailing trip that began 5 months after the executions. Innocent men do not flee the country for 2 years after a double murder investigation opens with their name at the top of the list. The third layer, and the one that most clearly revealed what kind of man Michael Goodwin was the testimony of 15 witnesses who'd heard him make threats against Mickey Thompson's life. One after another they came, each one describing a different conversation, a different setting, a different version of the same essential message. Goodwin telling people Mickey was going to die. Goodwin saying he'd be wasted. Goodwin explaining that Mickey would never see a dime of that judgment because he wouldn't be alive to collect it. And threaded through all of it, the recurring claim that he was too smart to get caught. When 15 independent witnesses all described the same behavioral pattern over a period of years, that is not coincidence and it cannot be dismissed. Catherine Wiss testified that she'd heard Goodwin on speakerphone telling Thompson directly, "I will take you out and you know I can." Bill Wilson, the retired police officer, laid out that conversation in full detail, Goodwin announcing his intentions, Wilson telling him plainly it was a losing scenario, and Goodwin dismissing the concern because the authorities would never catch him. He said these things to a former law enforcement officer. That tells you something profound about how invincible he felt. The defense strategy was straightforward and not without merit as a legal argument. No physical evidence. That was the spine of everything they presented. Goodwin's fingerprints were not at the crime scene. His DNA was not there. Nobody saw him in Bradbury that morning. Nobody saw him with the shooters. Nobody had a recording, a written communication, a money transfer. And the defense pointed to something specific that was genuinely significant. DNA found on the stun gun left at the scene and under Trudy Thompson's fingernails did not match Michael Goodwin. If he was involved, where was his DNA? The prosecution's answer was logical but required the jury to follow the reasoning all the way through. This is what murder for hire looks like. The person who orders the killing does not show up to commit it. That's the entire point of hiring someone else. Goodwin's absence from the crime scene was not evidence of his innocence. It was evidence of his method. The defense also tried alternative theories. Maybe it was a robbery gone wrong. some suggestion that the killers had been after gold coins Mickey allegedly kept at the house. Maybe it involved motorcycle gangs. Maybe someone else entirely had reason to want Mickey Thompson dead. None of those theories, however, could explain 15 witnesses independently describing Goodwin's threat. None of them accounted for the timeline. The judgment finalized 35 days before the murders, the yacht deposit 7 weeks before the murders, the offshore transfers and gold purchases in the weeks and months after. None of the alternative theories fit the totality of the evidence the way Goodwin's motive and behavior fit it. The trial ran approximately 2 months. January 4, 2007. The jury came back with a verdict: guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, specifically that he had committed multiple murders and had killed for financial gain. Under California law, those special circumstances made him eligible for life without the possibility of parole. District Attorney Steve Cooley addressed the press afterward. This 18-year ordeal for the family members of Mickey and Trudy Thompson is now over. Justice has been secured. 18 years. That number lands differently the more you sit with it. Colleen Campbell had been fighting for this for 18 years. March 2, 2007. Sentencing day. Judge Schwartz addressed the courtroom and spoke directly to the nature of the case. It was a circumstantial case, she said, but the evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was appropriate. Goodwin was given the opportunity to speak, and what he said was entirely consistent with everything we know about who he was. I can't apologize because I'm not guilty. It was a tragedy that they were killed. The world lost an incredible inventor. 18 years. 15 witnesses. A jury verdict. And he's still denying it. The sentence was 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Colleen Campbell delivered a victim impact statement. She called Goodwin a coward and a bully who hired and arranged for shooters to kill Mickey and Trudy for his self-indulgence, greed, and sinful plan. Outside the courthouse, someone asked her what she wanted now. Her response was that she hoped he hurried up and died. After 18 years of carrying all of this, I don't think that requires explanation or apology. Goodwin appealed. January 26, 2015, the appellate court upheld the conviction and described the evidence as overwhelming. March 3, 2021, another appeals court denied his petition for resentencing. Every legal avenue has been exhausted. He is incarcerated at Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego. Inmate number F69095. He has been behind bars since April 11, 2007. He will die there. Now here's the part of this story that remains permanently, frustratingly unresolved. The 2 men who got on those bicycles and rode away through the Bradbury Gates on the morning of March 16, 1988, have never been identified. Not in 1988. Not during the 2001 reinvestigation. Not during the trial. Not in any of the years since. 37 years later, we do not know who they were. We don't know where they came from. We don't know how Goodwin found them or how much he paid them or whether they're still alive. The case remains technically open. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department would still like to prosecute the actual triggermen. The $1 million reward Colleen Campbell posted in 1998 has never been claimed. The DNA collected from the stun gun and from under Trudy Thompson's fingernails continues to be run through national databases as new profiles are added. No match has ever come back. Somewhere out there, 2 men know exactly what happened in that driveway. They know who called them. They know what they were paid. They know details that have never appeared in any court document or media report. And they have kept that knowledge to themselves for 37 years. Look, let me tell you what I keep coming back to when I think about this case. Michael Goodwin told Bill Wilson that they'd never catch him because he was too smart for that. And for 19 years, he was completely right. He designed it carefully. He hired strangers. He paid in untraceable ways. He left the country for 2 years. He let the case go cold and then went to prison for something else and served his time and walked out and resumed his life. The murder case was still technically open but effectively dead. He had gotten away with it. The only reason he didn't die a free man was because Colleen Campbell refused to accept that outcome, because a television program prompted witnesses who'd spent 13 years carrying a secret to finally pick up the phone, and because a new generation of detectives inherited a cold case and kept pushing. Here's what most people don't realize about cases like this one. The circumstantial evidence that finally convicted Goodwin was available much earlier. Those witnesses existed in 1988. The financial records existed in 1988. The timeline connecting the judgment to the murders was always there. What was missing wasn't evidence so much as the accumulation of it and the willingness of witnesses to come forward. The case illustrates something important about how cold case justice actually works. Time doesn't just work against investigations. Sometimes it works for them. People who were afraid or ambivalent in the immediate aftermath of a crime grow older, carry the weight of what they know, and eventually decide that silence has cost them enough. Now I want to talk about what this case cost everyone, because behind the procedural details and the legal chronology there are real losses that don't get easier to absorb. Mickey Thompson was 59 years old when he was shot in that driveway. The man had set 485 speed record. He was still working, still building, still promoting, still moving at the speed of someone with 100 things left to accomplish. We don't know what else he would have done. More land speed attempts. More innovations. Maybe the two-way average above 400 miles per hour that had haunted him since 1960 when he hit 406 going one direction and the engine scattered before he could make the return run. We will never know. Trudy Thompson was 41. She was not a public figure. She was a woman who loved her husband and who died in a driveway in the dark because Michael Goodwin decided murder was preferable to paying a legal judgment. In those final moments, shot through the windshield, dragged from the van, she knew exactly what was happening. They both did. Mickey on the ground calling out not to hurt her. Trudy screaming for them to stop. The killers made him watch. That detail is in the record. That is what Goodwin paid for with his hidden cash and offshore accounts. That scene. That moment. Those were the last seconds of two people's lives, and they were arranged deliberately. Mickey's son Danny Thompson grew up without his father, and he spent decades working on something that gave the story one of its few genuinely moving chapters. In 1968, Mickey Thompson built a car called Challenger 2. He built it specifically to finally achieve that two-way average above 400 miles per hour to claim the record officially. But the Bonneville salt flats flooded that year and the attempt never happened. The car sat. Years passed. Mickey was murdered. And then Danny Thompson made it his mission. On August 12 and 13, 2018, Danny took Challenger 2 to Bonneville. 448.757 miles per hour, two-way average. Piston-powered, wheel-driven. His father's car. His father's dream. 30 years after Mickey was killed. 50 years after the car was built. Danny Thompson got the record Mickey never could. He did it alone, without his father there to see it, and every single thing about that is both triumphant and heartbreaking in equal measure. Dan Gurney, who drove Mickey's car at Indianapolis in 1962, once described him as a charismatic American go-getter, a trailblazer with an infectious and stimulating love for the automobile, a huge credit to Southern California hot rod racing. A family friend put it differently. All of us shared Mickey's vision, but none of us was Mickey. Where Mickey left his footprint, no one could ever quite fill it. That's the real measure of what Michael Goodwin took from the world. Not just two lives. A force of nature who invented things before they existed and left the world more interesting than he found it. And here's the thing that makes me genuinely angry every time I come back to this. Goodwin could have just paid the judgment. $768,000. He was making $240,000 a year running his wife's company while hiding behind her ownership of it. He was buying yachts and gold coins. He had the resources. Instead, he spent those resources on contract killers. He spent 19 years looking over his shoulder, lying to everyone around him, going to federal prison for fraud, watching the murder case periodically resurface in the press, and now he's spending what remains of his life in a cell in San Diego. All of it, every bit of it, because he couldn't accept being held accountable for stealing from someone who trusted him enough to go into business with him. Michael Goodwin thought he was too smart to get caught. He was wrong. He wasn't smart. He was just patient. And so was Colleen Campbell. And in the end, her patience outlasted his luck. The $1 million reward remains unclaimed. The DNA keeps searching and keeps coming back empty. 2 men rode bicycles out of Bradbury on the morning of March 16, 1988, and the world has never seen them since. If you know something, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is still listening. So is the Thompson family. So, for that matter, is everyone who believes that justice, even when it takes nearly 2 decades to arrive, is worth fighting for. Mickey Thompson was the first American to break 400 miles per hour. He invented the slingshot dragster. He created stadium off-road racing. He held 485 speed record. And he died at 59 years old in his own driveway, in a gated community he'd chosen specifically because he wanted to feel safe, because one man couldn't accept losing a lawsuit. If you were around when this happened, if you followed the case over the years or watched the trial unfold, drop a comment below. And if you're new to this story, I'd love to know what hit you hardest. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more from Motorsport Heritage.